Hello and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we have a mission that's really fundamental to real-world conversation. We're diving straight into the practical language of daily life. So if you're a learner wanting to move past just vocabulary lists and, really start talking about what you do every single day, then you are definitely in the right place.
That's exactly right. This deep dive, it's built around a foundational English lesson. We're focusing on daily routines, and its usefulness is, well, it's immediate, it's constant. Think about it. We talk about our day every day, whether you're chatting with a colleague, maybe updating family, or just making simple small talk. But it's more than just, listing verbs. Our mission here is to show you the structure, the mechanics of how to describe those habits effectively.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So the goal isn't just listing actions. It's about pulling out those essential verbs, really looking at the grammar holding them together, like the simple present tense for habits.
Right, for those regular actions.
Exactly. And identifying those crucial time expressions and transition words. You need to narrate your own 24 hours confidently.
And if we think bigger picture, discussing routines it's like the bedrock for conversational fluency. It's not just vocabulary, it's about mastering the rhythm of English structure. Because, even if your routine changes a little day to day, maybe you skip the gym one morning, the basic language you use, that stays the same. Mastering the set lets you practice dozens of common verbs and, crucially, how to sequence them right.
Sequencing. That's so important, isn't it? We don't just throw out a list of actions. We need order. So let's start with the tools, the building blocks for that foundation. We've pulled out 8 essential phrases from our source material that really define the structure of a day. This is your immediate vocabulary toolkit, but we're going to give each phrase a proper deep dive, look into it properly.
Absolutely. We need to look at the words themselves, the context they're used in, and especially those little grammatical details, the nuances they carry, because that's what takes your language from just basic understanding to actually using it fluently.
Okay, let's kick off with number 1, arguably the most important action of the day. Wake up early. Waking up early.
Right. This phrase, it defines that moment you finish sleeping. It's the transition point. Our source material introduces us to Jessie. It says she wakes up at 6 a.m. every weekday. Notice that simple present tense wakes up. That tells us it's a habit, something she does regularly.
But here's where it gets interesting linguistically, and it tackles a really common point of confusion for learners. Jessie immediately follows up with how she feels about it, using the noun form. I don't like waking up early.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is the role of the gerund. Waking up, that verb, plus it's acting like a noun here. It's the object of the verb like. She isn't saying, I don't like to wake up early, which is also correct, grammatically speaking. But I don't like waking up early focuses on the act itself, the experience. Understanding this distinction lets you create much richer sentences like, running is good for you, or eating ice cream makes me happy. It's a really key structural point just from this first phrase.
That's a fantastic insight. Shows how flexible one little phrase can be. Okay, phrase number 2 is the immediate physical follow-up. Get out of bed.
Simple, right? But universally understood. This is that physical shift from being horizontal to, well, getting vertical, moving. Jessie explicitly states, Jessie first gets out of bed, and we use this verb get all the time in English to talk about changes in state or location. Get dressed, get ready, get to work. It's a real powerhouse verb for daily life.
Definitely. Moving on to a ritual, number 3, and this is critical for many of us. Make a cup of coffee.
Yes. This covers preparing that essential morning fuel. Notice we use the verb make when we're talking about preparing food or drinks. So Jessie goes to the kitchen and makes coffee. Now, look at the extra detail the source gives us because it includes a more specific verb. If you're waiting for the coffee machine, you can say, while the coffee is brewing.
Yeah.
That verb, to brew, it adds a nice touch of specificity, a bit more color to your routine description than just making.
And while that coffee is brewing was probably the most common modern activity, that takes us straight to number 4. Check my phone.
Oh, absolutely. This action is almost a reflex these days, isn't it? It just means looking at your mobile for, communication information. The sources rightly point out this covers checking messages, emails, maybe scrolling through social media. Jessie checks her phone while the coffee is brewing. And that's a perfect example of describing 2 things happening at the same time, linked by that simple word, while. This connection is a basic building block for creating conversational flow.
Good point. Shifting from, let's say, consuming information to getting ready for the day. Number 5 is get dressed.
And there's that verb, get again, describing the process of putting on clothes. The sources give us a useful comparison here, too, noting the difference between everyday work clothes and maybe more formal wear. Jessie says she wears simple clothes for work like pants and a shirt, not fancy clothes. This kind of vocabulary lets you describe your outfit choice pretty easily without needing, complicated fashion terms.
Very practical. Okay, phrase number 6 deals with getting from A to B. Take the bus drive to work.
Right, this is all about commuting. And linguistically, it's a goldmine for prepositions and verbs of motion. When we use public transport like a bus, a train, the subway, we usually use the verb take. So Jessie takes the bus. If it's our own car, we use drive, the hosts drive. Simple distinction, but important.
And crucially, the source material immediately shows how to talk about how long it takes. The bus ride is about 30 minutes. Notice how we use the noun ride to describe the journey itself and the word about to show it's an estimate, an approximation, which sounds much more natural in conversation than saying exactly 29 minutes.
Exactly. Much more natural. Number 7 moves us to the middle of the day for sustenance. Have lunch. Bring my lunch.
Have lunch is the core action phrase here. But then the source material adds the practical side, bringing food a sandwich or salad or maybe leftovers. This vocab is really useful for talking about things like healthy eating, maybe saving money, meal prep. Jessie confirms she has lunch at 12 p.m. noon. That specific time marker.
And finally, rounding out our essential 8 is that vital step for mental recovery and getting your energy back. Relax for a bit.
Yeah, this refers to that moment when we consciously decide to unwind after doing something. Jessie's example gives specific actions. Sitting on the sofa, watching TV, or reading a book. Jessie relaxes when she arrives home around 5 p.m. And we often use that little phrase for a bit to signal a short, kind of undefined period of relaxation. It's casual, but really common.
Okay, so that's our toolkit, 8 key phrases.
Now that we've analyzed our 8 Ps toolkit, let's see how they actually work together in a story, in a narrative. We're going to use Jessie's typical weekday routine as our comprehensive case study here. And this is where you, the listener, should really pay close attention to the sequencing and the specific use of those transition words we mentioned, words like first, next, after that, and around, that make it all flow smoothly.
Jessie's story is a fantastic example. It shows how to connect these simple actions into a coherent, flowing description, all using that simple present tense because it's about her habitual life. Let's start with her morning, running from, say, 6 a.m. through to about 7 a.m.
Okay, so the alarm goes off at 6 a.m. That's her wake-up time every weekday. And she's very honest about it. She tells us she doesn't like waking up early. But she accepts it because her job starts early. She has to.
Right, and that feeling that we sometimes do things we don't love because we have to, that's a great conversational point itself. Makes it relatable. Her action sequence starts right away, using those transition words we talked about. She says, first she gets out of bed, simple. Then she goes to the bathroom. And in the bathroom, she brushes her teeth and washes her face. See the sequence. First. Then. And she adds a lovely reason for these actions. She notes this process helps her feel more awake.
I love those little personal details. They make the description feel real, human. Okay, from the bathroom, it's straight to the kitchen for the next phase. The coffee and digital check.
She really emphasizes the coffee part. She makes a cup of coffee because, well, she clearly loves it. And while the coffee is brewing, using that specific verb we highlighted, she checks her phone, she looks at messages, emails, confirming that modern routine we talked about. It's often that quiet, maybe slightly reflective start to the day for many people.
Totally. Following that little ritual, she gets ready physically. She gets dressed, putting on her simple clothes for work.
And this is immediately followed by breakfast. She eats breakfast. Her routine is quick, simple. Toast with butter and jam, plus her coffee. Sometimes she adds fruit, for a bit of extra nutrition. This structure shows how you can list items in a routine. Verb plus noun object. Eat toast, add fruit. Very clear.
Okay, the next major phase is her commute and workday, which kicks off pretty sharpish at 7 a.m. She leaves her house then, and she takes the bus.
Right. And since we already broke down the difference between take the bus and drive, let's look at how she uses that travel time. The bus ride is about 30 minutes, and she spends it productively. She listens to music or a podcast. That's a great phrase for describing multitasking while you commute. She arrives at her workplace around 7:30 a.m., and her actual work starts 15 minutes later at 7:45 a.m.
And she works in a pretty standard office environment, it seems. So her first tasks are, well, technical, administrative. She checks her emails and then immediately starts her tasks. She mentioned she works on her computer for many hours, which is such a standard phrase now for describing office work, isn't it?
It really is. Her lunch break is scheduled quite precisely, 12 p.m. noon, and she sticks to that habit of bringing her own food from home, usually a sandwich or a salad. Economical, probably healthy too.
And this detail provides a great opportunity to talk about social interaction. She doesn't just eat alone in a corner. She eats with her coworkers, and they talk and laugh. She even points out that this social break is important for making the workday more enjoyable. It shows a routine isn't just about tasks. It's about the human element, too.
Absolutely. The afternoon is more focused work, and sometimes she has meetings. The source material mentions meetings are just a standard part of her job. Her structured workday finishes relatively early compared to some at 4:30 p.m.
Okay, now we shift focus again, moving into her evening and night routine, starting with her journey home and that initial decompression time. After finishing work, she takes the bus home again, arriving around 5 p.m.
And as soon as she gets in the door, she uses that key relaxation phrase we identified. She likes to relax for a bit. She gives specific examples of what that means for her. She sits on the sofa, maybe watches a little TV, or reads a book. This is her crucial transition time, switching off from work mode.
Following that relaxation period around 6:30 p.m., she moves on to the next big domestic task, making dinner. She mentions she actually enjoys cooking and tries new recipes sometimes. That adds another layer of personality to her routine, doesn't it?
It does. And right after the enjoyment of cooking and eating comes, well, the less fun but necessary part. She washes the dishes. That phrase, wash the dishes, it seems simple, but it's a fundamental part of describing keeping house.
So true. The later evening is then dedicated to leisure and family time. She spends time with her family. Maybe they watch a movie together or just talk. Sometimes she fits in a bit of exercise too. Perhaps she goes for a walk.
And finally, the winding down, the bedtime preparation begins. Before bed, she takes a shower, and then she reads a book for a little while. That reading habit is such a classic wind-down activity, and the phrase for a little while nicely signals that short, relaxing duration.
Her structured day wraps up with a clear aim. She usually goes to bed around 10:30 p.m. She's aiming to get enough sleep, specifically about 7 or 8 hours.
Jessie's story is just so valuable. It's a perfect illustration of using that simple present tense to link actions one after the other, describing a regular pattern. Now, let's pivot slightly. We'll move from Jessie's single narrative to comparing routines. This shows how flexible this core vocabulary is when you apply it to different lives, specifically ours, based on the source material provided.
Yeah, I think this comparison is really key for the listener. It just shows that while the verbs, the basic actions are often the same, the details around them can be quite different. Let's look closely at the similarities and differences in our morning rituals compared to Jessie's.
Okay. What jumps out immediately is how similar the very first actions are. All three routines share that need to wake up early for work, whether it's Jessie at 6 a.m. or us maybe a bit later around 7 a.m. And we share that feeling sometimes, that reluctance. The alarm goes off and you need a reason to get up, and usually that reason is the job.
You know, it's interesting how the sources capture that human side of it, that reluctance. It kind of confirms it's okay to admit you don't like waking up early using that gerund form, waking up, that we talked about.
Absolutely. And the essential, immediate actions, they're identical across the board. Get out of bed, go to the bathroom, brush teeth, wash face. These seem to be fixed points in most morning routines. However, we see the first little difference in the next phase, the coffee connection.
Right. Making a cup of coffee seems to be a non-negotiable must for all three of us. But the context shifts slightly. For Jessie, it's while the coffee is brewing that she checks her phone. For me, I often find I'm listening to the morning news while the kettle boils, or maybe while I'm getting my breakfast ready. That linking word while is still essential for showing those parallel actions.
And this is where we see some nice variety. The breakfast comparison, Jessie's, is very simple. Toast, butter, jam. I usually go for something like yogurt with fruit and granola, or maybe sometimes toast and eggs.
And for me, it's often toast and eggs too, or sometimes, if I'm really rushed, just the simplest option, cereal. What this shows, I think, is that when you talk about meal variety, you just need simple, concrete nouns. Yogurt, fruit, granola, eggs, cereal. The structure, I eat plus noun, is the important part, not needing fancy food vocabulary.
Good point. Now, let's look at maybe the biggest contrast, the commute. This needs different verbs entirely. Jessie takes the bus, which takes her about 30 minutes. We both drive to work, though my commute is much shorter, maybe 15 minutes. Yours is a bit longer, closer to 25 minutes.
Yeah, about that. And this is a perfect moment to just quickly reinforce those transport verbs and prepositions. We drive to work, we take the bus or the train. You might walk to work if you live close by. The verb often signals the mode of transport.
Precisely. Okay, let's move into the workday overlap and nuance. Jessie starts her work at 7:45 a.m., which is quite early. We tend to start a little later, which naturally means we finish later too. One of us around 5:00 or 5:30 p.m., the other maybe 4:00 or 5 p.m. But the core vocabulary, start work, finish work, that stays the same. It's just the time markers that change.
And the first task of the day seems universal. We all involve checking emails first thing in the morning and then spending many hours working on the computer. That part of the office routine seems very predictable, very common.
Lunch timing offers another neat little distinction in how we use time expressions. Jessie is very precise. 12 p.m. noon. Contrast that with one of the hosts who usually eats lunch around 1 p.m.
See, this gives the listener great flexibility in their own language. You can use exact times like 12 p.m. noon, or you can use more general words like around or roughly if your schedule is more flexible.
Yeah.
We also see confirmation that bringing lunch from home, whether it's leftovers or a salad, that's a shared habit. Probably for efficiency, maybe cost.
And we shouldn't forget the vocabulary for modern work structures. The sources specifically mention meetings. We confirm that we also have meetings, and often specify online meetings. This shows how easily we can adapt that basic phrase, have meetings, with modern words like online or virtual.
Okay, let's shift focus again now to that really important decompression phase after work, the evening routine. This is where we use those relaxation verbs we learned about earlier.
Yeah, and this is where that shared human need to just switch off becomes really clear. All three of us agree it's vital to relax for a bit when we get home from work.
I know for me, that process starts almost immediately. I change into comfortable clothes pretty much as soon as I walk in the door. While Jessie might sit straight on the sofa, I sometimes put on music or just kind of unwind for a few minutes before I even think about the next task. This gives the learner some nice synonyms for relaxing. Unwind, decompress, rest.
When it comes to dinner time, Jessie and one of us tend to make dinner around the same time, between maybe 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. But the source material provides that useful counterpoint, the convenience option. While we both might enjoy cooking, one of us admits, sometimes I order food. That phrase, order food, is essential vocabulary for the alternative to cooking at home.
Good one. And regardless of whether you cook or order in, the unavoidable task is waiting. All three individuals confirm that washing the dishes is just a necessary part of the routine. Simple, non-negotiable phrase, that one.
Looking at evening leisure and sleep, the activities described are remarkably similar, which really confirms how useful this core language is. Things like spending time with family, watching a movie, reading a book, or maybe going for a walk for some light exercise. Notice how we often say go for a walk rather than just walk, especially when we mean it as a leisure activity or light exercise.
Finally, those bedtime rituals. Both us and Jessie use activities to wind down. We all seem to take a shower and read a book before bed. Although personally, I often listen to an audiobook instead of reading a physical book these days. It just shows the flexibility in how you describe that reading time.
And the sleep goal is also pretty uniform. We all seem to aim for that sweet spot of 7 or 8 hours of sleep, with bedtime falling somewhere between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. We use phrases like try to get enough sleep to express that goal, that aspiration, acknowledging that, life doesn't always let us hit it perfectly.
This comparison really drives home that even with different jobs, different commutes, different specific timings, the core language, those foundational verbs, the time markers, the sequencing words, it's all perfectly reusable.
Okay, let's bring all these threads together now. The real power of this deep dive, I think, is realizing just how much useful, practical, everyday vocabulary we managed to extract from Jessie's simple story. And we did it by focusing on the grammar, the structure.
Yeah, we learned a huge number of verbs that are truly everyday actions. Maybe we can categorize them quickly just to help solidify them.
Good idea. Okay, for the beginning of the day, we have things like wake up, get out of bed, brush teeth, wash face, make coffee, check my phone, get dressed, eat breakfast, leave my house. Quite a list already.
Definitely. Then for the workday and travel. Take the bus, drive to work, arrive at work, check emails, start tasks, work on the computer, have lunch, have meetings, finish work, go home.
And finally, for the evening and rest. Relax for a bit, make dinner, wash the dishes, spend time with family, watch a movie, go for a walk, take a shower, read a book, and the final one, go to bed.
Wow, that's a staggering list of really foundational verbs, and all used in that simple present tense to talk about regular habits. And crucially, we also reinforce the importance of those time expressions and sequencing markers that we saw used throughout Jesse's story in our comparison.
Exactly. We saw precise times like 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 12 p.m. noon, 4:30 p.m., and 10:30 p.m. These give structure to your narrative. But we also saw there's more flexible markers like first, then, next, after that, around, and while. These are the words that make the story flow naturally, like real conversation.
So if we connect this right back to our mission for you, the listener, the next step is, well, it's immediate application. You've heard the structure, you've got the verbs.
Right. This is your practice prompt. Now that you have this toolkit, we really want you to try and apply it straight away. Tell someone, or even just say it out loud to yourself, maybe record it on your phone.
Yeah.
Tell us about 3 things you did this morning that are part of your usual routine. Try to focus on using a sequencing word like first or then, and use one of the time expressions we talked about.
Yeah, for example, first I woke up around 7 a.m. Then I made coffee while I listened to the news. After that, I got dressed. Something simple like that. Go on, take a brief moment right now to think about and maybe even formulate those 3 sentences in your head. The silence is yours to practice.
That daily practice, even just for a minute or two, is really key to making these phrases feel natural, automatic when you speak. By breaking down your own day into these simple, structured phrases, you're moving the vocabulary from just being something you know about to something you can actually use. It becomes muscle memory.
We really hope this deep dive into the daily routine has given you a clear, structured way to talk about your own life in English, focusing not just on what you do, but how to structure the language correctly. Keep practicing these core verbs every day.
Absolutely. The more you use the simple present for these everyday actions, the sooner it just becomes second nature. You won't even have to think about it.
We really appreciate you diving deep with us today on this fundamental topic.
And just to leave you with a final provocative thought. We heard Jessie say her weekday routine is super busy, but her weekend routine is very different, much more relaxed. So if your own weekday feels packed, think about this. What is one single difference you would like to incorporate into your weekend routine specifically to make it more relaxed? And how would you describe that desired action using the kind of language we've learned today?
That's definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive. Keep practicing your English daily, keep talking about your routine, and we'll see you next time.